I think that our nation as a whole, we are in an environment where it is so much easier for us to be a helpless victim. I think it started with marketing. Now, I don't mind if you disagree with this, but I'm going to posit this, that once marketing really figured out the best way to move the needle was to scare us, then we act out of a preponderance of caution.
Yeah.
And so we buy said product or buy said service. Do you disagree with that? And if you do, break it down in your own way. But I think that we just are in this environment now where we're just these helpless victims without the help of a product or a service.
Well, the number one way to sell a product is to position it as the solution to a problem.
Of course.
In fact, nobody buys anything unless it's the solution to a problem.
Right.
Nobody votes for a leader unless they're the solution to a problem.
Right.
You don't take any actions unless it's the solution to a problem. The problem is when you get into marketing, you got to sort of agitate a problem that doesn't exist if you want to sell the product that is the solution to the problem. And that's where you get into the real trappings, which are the way those marketing messages affect our identity.
Yes.
And I would say the number one predictor of whether you will have a life in which you struggle with anxiety and depression, lower wages, less quality relationships, the number one predictor of that is whether or not you see yourself as a victim. Not whether you are a victim. Those are two different things. Whether you identify as a victim. Because we all know people who are victims who literally just are incapable of perceiving themselves as a victim. And they just shine. I mean, they accomplish more than any of us. And I remember watching the interview with Denzel Washington and watch somebody try to victim bait him. And by victim bait, I mean try to convince him or feel sorry for him. He will wiggle out of that so fast to the point where he gets angry.
Yes.
And you're just like, hey, I'm one of the most blessed people on the planet. I know the color of my skin. I'm one of the most blessed people on the planet. There's nothing in my life worth feeling sorry for. So shut your mouth. Let's keep going. You know, he just will not.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And what he's discovered is that he benefits amazingly from that. It pays him to have that mindset. And even with my daughter, one of the things, I've got a 3.5-year-old. So, of course, she rightly, according to the seasons of her life, whines and wants her way. And, 5 times a day I say, hey, Emmeline, Millers don't whine. We just don't whine. Right. We don't do that. And so but sometimes it's okay to whine. I go, yes, sometimes it's okay. But as a rule, we don't do. That's not what we do. I don't judge her. Hey, don't whine. You're being a loser. You're being a little victim. I'm calling her into an aspirational identity that we're attempting to live as a family, which gives her a tribe, and a tribe defined by characteristics. But really what I'm doing is I'm not letting that identity fester for very long because it's a deadly one. And if she lives in that identity, you know who's going to come along and rescue her? A really bad dude.
Yeah.
And we're not letting that happen.
Yeah.
So, so to me, I think Satan is after your identity. And I think the number one thing he wants is to take you out so that you're unusable to serve God.
Yep.
And the number one way he's going to do that is with a victim identity.
Yep.
And, you watch somebody, had the honor of being out here with Jelly Roll recently at his house. That dude has had a victim to hero identity transformation. And look at what's 10 years in prison, that man. Look at what's happened to him. He's down 100 pounds. He's winning Grammys. He's got the best smile arguably on the planet.
Yep. Yep.
And he's an inspiration.
No question.
And it's hard. It's hard because I think victim mindset feels very, very good. It's very Rabbi Lapin would call it seductive.
Right. Is that because it's easier for us to rationalize where we are if we blame it on other people and other environments?
Yeah, well, it's an excuse.
Yeah, that's right. It's
it's
easy.
an excuse. So this is my failures or somebody else's fault. It's very hard for me. It's harder for me than it is for most people. By the way, these are true statements for a lot of people. I mean, give me a break. There
That's
are people that, I love Thomas Sowell's idea out of the Hoover Institute where he just talks about the fact that, the world is not equal. If you think that everybody started with the same abilities, you're wrong. They didn't. However, everybody is given the opportunity to shine. So you got to be honest about, if the rivers on your continent don't flow toward the ocean, everybody's going to be poor because you can't get ships to those ports.
Yeah.
And so now you go, okay, what do you do with that, right? Are we going to be the victims or are we not? And but what his point is, you find the people who don't see themselves as victims and they can overcome anything. But that's not to say that there aren't real victims. See, I never want to be hurt. I never want to be thought of. If you've been abused and you've got trauma, you are an actual victim. What I'm saying is identifying as a victim is not going to help you.
Yeah.
You've got to see yourself as somebody with something to overcome that, by the way, if you overcome it, you will be superior to the person who never had challenge in the first place.
That's right. Yeah.
You absolutely, you're going to be more empathetic, you're going to be smarter, you're going to be tougher, you're going to have more opportunity. And you find these folks who have overcome the greatest, most accomplished people in the world. I guarantee you they had to overcome more than somebody else.
Yeah, no question. I want to ask you about reinventing because it feels like on the heels of this conversation, we have no idea what jobs are going to look like 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Certainly 10 years from now. You reinvented yourself when I first met you. Not only you reinvented yourself physically, but you reinvented yourself as a guy who was known as an author in the faith space and a tremendous writer. And then you really transitioned. Now you're one of the most trusted voices, with the story brand books. And you've really done a lot of great work in a different genre, if you could say that. And I'm just curious, what was the impetus for that in your life? And then what can we learn from it as we walk through your journey? Because at some point you begin to transition. Still the same guy, still a great writer, but I've never asked you that. What led to that transformation or that reinvention? And then what do we learn from that?
Yeah, so I think at the end of life, I'll have had 3 careers. One is a memoirist, right? Blue Like Jazz and A Million Miles and books like that. And then as a business writer, and then hopefully as a sort of statesman, just kind of floating ideas and plans that the American people can maybe buy into and other politicians can get around and maybe even make their own platform out of. Those would be the 3 careers, but they all have one thing in common, and that is making very complex ideas simple and accessible and easy to understand. Of course, there's a reductionistic element to making anything simple. Some of it gets thrown out and you get into nuanced truth, it gets more complicated. But I think those, helping people understand what the gospel of Jesus really is, which is a mysterious relational transaction, not a theological quiz that you have to get the answers right. That was very controversial at the time, which seems ridiculous to me that would be controversial even remotely.
Well, if we look at where we are now, if Blue Like Jazz is written today, it's not even a controversy.
It's boring.
That's so true. That's right.
And then, Stephen Mansfield, who's a friend of ours and a very, 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 very wise man, said that one of the leading indicators of a downfall is that you don't realize when a season has ended. And you're trying to stick the season out when you are no longer motivated by these topics anymore. And I wrote 7 or 8 memoirs, and they were just done. I mean, the publisher always wants more because they can make money off it, and because they like them. They're not just money grabbers. But it was done for me. I didn't have anything else to write about, and that season felt like it had come to an end. The other thing is, you just saw an interview with Bob Dylan recently, and he said, look, I can't write what I used to write. I can't write the songs that I used to write. When you're young and you have that creative sort of prose, poetic ability, it goes away. And so now I write songs that I'm able to write, but I can't go back. And he actually quoted some lyrics. He said, there's no possible way I could come up with that again. My brain has changed. Yes. And I identified so strongly with that. When you look at the prose and the sort of poetic flow in a book like Blue Like Jazz, I'm incapable of that now. I don't have that ability. But all those years looking at a blank cursor and figuring out how to open this paragraph translated to business books really well. And so now I can write books like that all day long and have all the exercise from having written those memoirs. And then I think, so the second career of writing business books, I think built on the first career. And then as God provides enough money for me to basically retire early and, fly back and forth, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Iowa, and, seed some ideas that voters need to understand, then I'll be able to do that and still get home by 5.
Yeah, which I love. and I love how that is actually an evolution.
It doesn't seem like, from the outside, it seems like a bunch of pivots, but it's actually doesn't feel like I pivoted once.
No, because your great skill is the ability to take the complex or confused ideas and just make them really simple.
Yeah.